Hello everybody. Hopefully I can get my paperwork here. Sit on this. Wow, what a year. I can't believe we're back in business and being part of a group like this. It's been really refreshing to feel back in a community of speakers today listening, and I do feel that it's quite amazing about how much we are speaking the same language about all the different things and all the different topics, and even just listening to the last session and the first two speakers today, it's really good to be back out here. So my session is on workplace culture. It has been... It's not my first slide. Look at that. Okay. I was like, this is not going to plan. Okay, so who in the room actually has employees? And I would suggest that the last 8 months or so has been incredibly challenging. So I'm going to run through a little bit of my story around what I've seen on the front line and looking at what I believe is the areas that we could, as employers, and that really invest our energy in to see the best results heading into 2021. So I feel at the moment, and that is really, it's a time heading towards the end of the year, and what we've all been through is that I wouldn't think that there's many businesses that can't say that their exact strategy is still in place. So it's a great opportunity to let's get back to the blueprint to understand what we need to change, what are we tweaking, what don't we know and about where we're heading, and that's actually perfectly okay to communicate that as well to our workforces. So one of the key things when I work with businesses is to ask them about that strategy. It doesn't need to be 40 pages where you've engaged hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants to help you get that vision. Is that most of us in small to medium enterprises do know the direction that we want to head and that feel that they've done their due diligence or are continuing to workshop on that. But what we fail to do in small to medium businesses is often communicate that to employees within our businesses, to be able to have those conversations with those employees and with that group of people that are actually helping us scale and add to our bottom line. And I guess that's the bit that I spend a fair amount of my time doing, is actually understanding where the business wants to go from the business owners, and then being able to help us construct that message to the employee group. So one of the first things is our mission, vision and values. Look, it doesn't need to be something like War and Peace. It really is. In small and medium businesses, if it's something that you don't spend a whole lot of time on, is a strategy on a page is just as powerful as 40 pages that you've spent weeks, months and lots of dollars on people assisting you with. But just getting started is better than not starting at all. One of the things that I'm certainly spending some time on now is regrouping about where we're at. I would say a large amount of us have sat down here in that bottom quadrant, the red quadrant, like a gerbil on a wheel, is that we're going around and looking to get one foot in front of the other each and every day. But what do we need to do to link that activity now that we're, I guess, hopefully moving in the right direction out of COVID, is that how do we now start to get really clear on linking that activity, what our staff and what ourselves are doing each and every day, and how that's actually linking back to our strategy, which is those amber and green areas above that. So that workforce activity and linking back to that strategy, how do we get ourselves back up above that line, that everything that we're doing has a purpose? One of the activities that I seem to be doing more and more of in the last few weeks is helping businesses and teams and groups within businesses is to document their workflow. What do we do? How do we get people through our front door or our online presence and that type of thing? And then how do we actually funnel them through our business until they actually convert to that sale and there's money in the bank? So really working through that workflow, and it's been really interesting to go back, and just because it's been a certain way up until now, is it doesn't actually mean that there's only one way of business coming in these days, or that we're actually on top of the multiple different streams and activities that are coming in. So looking at the how, what and why, and where is our room for improvement. And often your employee groups are the best place to start. They'll be able to tell you if things have changed or things are working or what's what's frustrating them about your workflow, and actually around where the slippage is. Again, if we're going back to our strategy, if we're getting people in the funnel, where are they slipping out of that funnel, and how do we plug that? Is it around customer experience? Is it that we're not converting? Like, where is our slippage in the business? So spending time with your employees, and look, it could be an hour, it could be a day, it could be a couple of days, is that you'll know your business better than anyone else out there, but it's simply about getting back to basics, what our mission, vision and value is, and then how do we actually document our workflow, and what is that particular employee in your business doing and adding value each and every day. So the other key area for me that's really important is how do we actually manage success in our organisation? How does a person in your business know if they're exceeding your expectations? Adults like to know, and that's really important, and it doesn't need, again, to be overly complicated. It's really just getting really that clearness of mind, and to sit down to go, if X, Y and Z is occurring, I would declare that particular position and person in my business to be exceeding my expectations. Whether how you measure it, it's completely up to you, but being able to measure it and for them to be able to measure their own tracking against their success. Okay. Employee leadership and engagement. Employee engagement and leadership. I must admit, I've reflected on this a fair bit, looking back on March and April. I reckon in time, if there was ever a HR memoirs and that, I've got a good chapter out of COVID-19 to add to that book. Back in March 2020, I must admit, I got some very, very quick clarity on what my purpose in life is. The last 2 weeks of March, heading into April, I think my entire career was working my way up to that particular point. Because in a very swift, sudden movement, every single person or client that I've ever worked with was seeking advice, was seeking what are our plans, what are we going to do here, and I don't think I've ever had a situation where I have had to make that many internal adjustments to workforce structures, roles, simultaneously at the same time. I never had more positions to recruit on my books at any one time. We had rain by March. Agriculture was starting to ramp up in the Central West, and certainly the areas that I touch on. And those secondary businesses connected to agriculture were all starting back up again. Agribusiness, manufacturers, and those types of places. So in those 2 or 3 weeks, it was just absolutely extraordinary to work across so many businesses so fast when we had significant lack of government direction there for days or weeks and that type of thing, where the businesses were already having the impact, but we didn't have any guidance or exact rollout of how things were going to happen. Even Fair Work was silent on those types of things. So really stripping all of that back is that we had to get really human at that point in time, having conversations with our workforces that it was actually perfectly okay to say, we don't know. And there was, lots of, conversations with business owners over those couple of weeks, and that the most important thing that we need right now is cool, calm leadership, and to really allow them to settle how unnerved they were, to allow us to get to a point where we could consider and start to implement the necessary changes that were needed in March and into April. One of the key things looking back, and this will remain the same whether it was March or heading into the end of 2020 and right into 2021, is to actually get the data that you have in your business to be able to make decisions around your workforces. Is that this is the best type of information that you can start with than simply just assuming or seeing what the competitor down the road is doing and that type of thing. So really extracting those facts and that data that you already have within your businesses. And that's what we've continued to do, whether it's sales data, whether it's inquiry data, whether it's workflow type data, how many days is it taking to process something through our business, how are we going on customer experience, how are we going on default, delivered in full on time. Those are those kind of things. How are we going with our turnover within our staffing group? how are we going with absenteeism? What are the kind of metrics that we could look at to give us an indication of what we need to be doing, what we need to be forecasting when it comes to people within our businesses? The other thing that, very much back in March and April when things were well and truly unknown, is that I was really adamant, whether it's just instinctual or whether it was a gut feel or whether I had somehow played out in this space before, but I was absolutely adamant that we needed to stay cool, calm and collected, because when the dust settles on this crisis, we're going to need to be in talent management mode. As from an economy, and we already were living in skill shortages, etc., for us to act rashly, to take the human element out and just really at the end of the day do what was needed for our bank balance right at that particular time or place, etc., is that we needed to get very quickly involved in what does all of this mean when the dust settles, because we will be, as employers, we will be rated on how we dealt at that point in time from a crisis perspective. So I've continued to be extremely adamant around talent management and talking to our workforces, even when it's messages that they didn't necessarily want to hear. Obviously, when it first went down in those days in March, we didn't have JobKeeper, etc. We obviously got to a point where we had people on that and we were able to really start to move into talent management mode. There was certainly times there that I wish that the government was able to come out with that JobKeeper sooner, because that we had moved into letting people go and making some pretty tough changes in that we didn't have a lot more wriggle room for at the time. So certainly talent management and having conversations around where the headspace is with your staff going into 2021 will be essentially important. Right, that's where the missing iceberg theory is, so we might just go backwards here for a moment, everybody. Nothing like being agile in 2020. Okay, so my message as I wrap up, I've been given the 5-minute wrap up and I could honestly have all day talking on this particular topic, but my message and I guess encouragement for each and every one of you that has employees in this room is to pop your goggles on and spend some time in the coming weeks, particularly before the Christmas shutdown, is to see what's actually under the water from an iceberg perspective in your workforces. Really understanding you may have seen different behaviours or things that you wouldn't have expected from some people in your workforces, whether they've stepped up and gone above and beyond, or whether they've really been shaky this particular year through this particular crisis. But I would really encourage you over the coming days, particularly before the end of the year, is to have that conversation where their headspace is at, how they're feeling, and really move into that talent management piece. Okay, we'll go back again to my last slide. Okay, so who's ready for 2021? Come on, put your hands up. Okay, so to wrap up, and from a workforce perspective, is that how do all of us turn this crisis recovery period into our advantage? And look, I will continue to nag on about this, is to start talking to your people. I would say career monitoring type conversations. I'm not sitting down saying, let's do the old school performance review, at the end of the year and the like. To be honest, I think that old school once a year annual performance review is very much dead in the water. It's around having those ongoing conversations. What are you happy with? Let people know they want to feel valued and they want that community feel in our businesses. Is that what are you happy with and what do you want to see more of from them? If your bottom line really means around staff next year, is that you think that you need to add to that, or you think that you need changes within your workforces, is really taking the time to plan and forecast this, because who here has been recruiting in the last little while in any of their businesses? Found it difficult? It's not going to get any better, folks. So my hot tips, am I on to my minute yet? Steve? I am. Okay. So really, how do you retain staff? Have that conversation with them, understand what their value proposition is, understand what motivates them. Ask the question, where do you see yourself in the next 2 to 3 years? You may not want to hear the answer, but you should, because that's going to give you some understanding and be able to plan further. You know, is it that they do expect that they will see some change? And look, the likelihood of handing out gold watches at 65 within our businesses is really not there anymore. It's rare. So really having those conversations and understanding and having a very open and transparent conversation with all team members, and that is so important to allow you to then start to understand how you're going to fill those particular gaps. Can you upskill people within your businesses and backfill in junior roles? You have those conversations. Who has aspirations to get a different license, get some exposure to another role within your business? So then you can cover leave. You can cover when someone does leave your businesses, should that happen. And look, the highest unemployment is in under 25. So if you can upskill staff in your businesses and backfill in lower roles and continue to upskill, ultimately that's another win-win for you as well. How do you attract staff going into 2021? How do you set yourself apart? Because going to the newspaper or even putting an advert on Seek, you could be majorly disappointed. There is a massive passive job seeker market out there, and how do you get yourself in front of those? We've spent a lot of time talking about finding customers on social media. I would suggest that you will find top-notch employees on social media as well. Challenging the status quo, the type of positions you have in your workplace, only considering the 9 to 5, and if someone's in front of you 9 to 5, then you don't want to talk to them. You've got a whole plethora of workforce out there that would love to work 9 till 3, for example. The gig economy is not going away. It is going to be that just in time. People want to work between different businesses on different projects. So realistically, sitting down and figuring out what you need in your business and not being too fixated in how you're going to find that particular labour to come into your businesses. We're on negative immigration. We have more people leaving this country and going back home than coming here to work at the moment. We certainly need immigration, whether it's backpackers or whether it's skilled visa holders coming in. We are going to be competing in a smaller fishbowl over the next 2 to 3 years. And like I said, passive job seekers and headhunting. Don't be scared to pick up the phone and seek out a coffee with someone, because you may have better success than popping that seek out up online. That is everything from me today. Thank you so much, everyone.